From Behelit to Rondon, a great number of the enemies of the world of Fear and Hunger are abhuman. They're men and women that have been morphed through some divine influence into something else. This is the case for the majority of enemies, in fact, from the basic guards to the horrifying Chromula. However, there are a number of creatures that can be encountered that notably have a non-human point of origin, or have drifted so far from humanity and developed such a distinct culture and biology that they should be considered an entirely new species. Some of these specimens are totally alien to us, while some have taken a delineation from our evolutionary path at some ancient juncture, much like with Homo neanderthalensis and regular homos like you. What follows is an anthropological study of these creatures aimed at giving you a broader perspective on the setting and what lurks beyond the bounds of human civilization. Oh, and I got Yuri, who I've watched drive himself mad playing Fear and Hunger on stream, to read a bunch of skin bibles without any context because I thought it would be funny, and yeah, it was.
Hold on now. Vitruvia. I know how to say Vitruvia now, but now I gotta figure out how to say this one.
We just killed that dog.
As is written in Enki Ankarian's skin bible Ulmer,
Sylvian, the older god of fertility, ordered a deity known as Vitruvia to create an architectural reprography of a man and a woman that would be the likeness of Sylvian herself. Vitruvius, being the master architect, did just that. Sylvian fell in love with the results. She went on to create mankind according to Vitruvius' drawings.
Whilst this is only one interpretation of events and likely heavily censored by the Vatican, we can see through these writings that the world of Fear and Hunger has a creationist mythology. There is a chronology of deific creatures that predate mankind. There were things before us. Further proof of this creationist origin can be found in Enki's skin bible Sylvian, which reads,
Sylvian, the goddess of love, lust, and creation. She created men and women at the dawn of time. From the very first moment, she loved her children dearly.
So it's evident that a prevailing belief, at least the belief published by the Vatican and accepted in Europa, is a creationist narrative, wherein humanity was created either by Sylvian or at her request. However, whilst mankind was potentially created at the dawn of time and favoured by the old gods, they did not begin their existence as the dominant life form. There was a time before the reign of men when another species dominated the planet. Dialogue with the New Gods tells us,
Before men, the Lizardmen roamed as the dominating life form.
Though they are now banished to the forgotten places of the world, the Lizardmen are far from extinct, and studies into their behaviour, as well as dialogue with the New Gods, can tell us a lot about their civilization. Now, there may well have been a lot of delineation between groups of Lizardmen, as indeed there are many delineations between human civilizations. Jataya, Abyssonia, Rondon, they all believe different things, and should be considered as separate cultures. The Lizardmen civilization we know the most about are those who inhabit the dungeons of Fear and Hunger, a group who have existed within the dungeon long before humans, as is proven with the New God dialogue.
Long ago, before men took the dungeons as their own, there dwelled a different race in the black.
These Lizardmen had their own systems of divinity, which appear to have been similar to the modern worship of new gods prevalent in Europa. The most prevalent inhabitants of the Green Hue, a birthplace of gods, are creatures called Blights, who are stated to be Lizardmen who have ascended by the new gods. The greatest of these Blights are said to rival the new gods of today in power. Interestingly, the Blights can be pacified by giving them a yellow vial. Yellow vials are crafted using golden chanterelle. This, alongside a study of environmental storytelling and the items found on the person of mortal Lizardmen, can give us some hints into their culture, diet, and values. Archaeological records hosted in Behelit of stones uncovered in Rondon, which is the present site of the Dungeons of Fear and Hunger, tell us of a civilization built around the worship of 9 chromatic blights, though little is known of this pantheon. The chromatic blight civilization seems to have been built around the worship of blights and the veneration of a warrior caste. These warriors adorn themselves with blood diamonds that magically siphon the life force of fallen enemies. One of these rings, called a Ring of Wraiths, is an ancient family heirloom of the Rondon royal family. Given that it's implied the Buckman family only have one such ring and the Lizardmen have many, it's likely that this heirloom was an archaeological find from the dungeons, and the royal family are wearing lizard jewellery, which is fun. Lizardmen warriors wield crude swords and hide armour, which they seemingly craft themselves. Given their proclivity for flaying trespassers, skinning foes seems to be just as much a religious practice as it is something done for the crafting of items. Perhaps this is an offering to the greatest of the Blights. Blood sacrifice and blood magic does hold immense power in the world of Fear and Hunger and is a feature of a great many religious rites. Another interpretation is that shed skin is symbolic of growth, and losers of conflicts are flayed in an attempt to make them stronger forcibly, or to demonstrate that the victor has symbolically outgrown the loser. The skin of reptiles is shed throughout their lifetime, and the blights, the greatest of the lizardmen, are notably skinless, so perhaps skin is synonymous with weakness in this species. The shedding of one's skin to gain power and undergo a rebirth is shown not only through the blights and this custom, but also through the rebirth of the Beloved spell, which Darce uses to resurrect Lagarde in her S ending. Regardless of the exact reasoning, it's clear that skin is an important part of the lizardmen culture. In addition to carrying herbs meant for healing, as outlined in Homer's Alchemelia, the lizardmen appear to live on an omnivorous diet of fungus and meat, which aligns with the subterranean ecology of their home. A particular delicacy seems to be the golden chanterelle, which is enough to pacify them in combat. Some have been known to smoke opium, though the extent of this is unknown and may be a later import due to them carrying the same pipes as human enemies. The warrior caste of the Chromatic Blight civilization still exists as of the events of Fear and Hunger. Some even appear to be hired by humans, as is seen through Nosramis and Nasra, making use of lizardmen to guard their places of study within the dungeon. The lizardmen appear to grow excited and beat their shields when challenged to duels, further showcasing the customs of their warrior culture. In addition to venerating their own gods, the lizardmen make use of the iconography of the Black Spider, which calls to mind the stories of a Spiderling society in ancient Mahabre. I know this is a Dark Souls reference. I've done the most cringe Dark Souls free run in the world recently. It was Sellsword Twin Blade, Fallen Knight Armor, and Spider Shield, but roll with me here. Mahabre is notably inhuman. Though perhaps humans once lived here, its moniker of the City of the Gods and the New Gods dialogue about it implies that it is a place inhospitable to ordinary people. Historically, Mahabre seems to be a place of creation, where an artificial life is created and given reign over the city. This is likely a result of the experimentation of New Gods of Enlightenment, a group of individuals I've already made a video on. Most recently, the city has found itself populated by the creations of the new god Valtiel. The Lord of the Flies are brutish, hairy creatures and the most populous of the new inhabitants of the city. Devoid of eyes, I posit they instead navigate through their sense of smell. At the very least, they likely identify their own through a distinct scent, as is proven by the player being able to move freely through their territory when adorning themselves in scented fur. Keeping humans in cages, it seems that the Lord of the Flies species are used as collectors for Valtiel's experiments. Whilst these creatures do showcase a degree of thought and the ability to utilise items like cages, they've yet to really develop to a point where we've seen them create anything on their own. They're very much a species in their infancy, and without the guidance of their creator, they're likely going to be left to rot in the City of the Gods, as many before them have. Indeed, the Lord of the Flies were created to be a servile worker class, with their creator writing of them, "For my starting point, I've set my aims to create a worker class being similar to the clay figurines of ancient times. There is one clear flaw in the design of the clay figurines, however. They are seemingly eternal beings. Only as they get damaged over time do they eventually perish. I do not believe my creations, my children so to speak, should ever outlive me, their creator, their father. That is why I decided to create the life form from the very same fabric fragile humans were created from: flesh." The silhouette of the form is very sturdy in order to carry out the working duties. I was able to combine existing matter into one, and the life form has gotten its shape already. The hairiness is a side product of mould. It seems without direction from their creator, the Lord of the Flies will die out, lacking the ability to think for themselves as a result of their stated purpose as a worker class, and lacking the immortality of the clay figurines upon which they are modelled. Indeed, even with immortality on their side, the clay figurines seem to have fallen into a listless state of despondency following their abandonment by the gods, and cannot really be considered as part of a developing civilization. Even worse for the Lord of the Flies is their susceptibility to the parasitic brain flower infection which has begun to seep into the city. All things considered, it's highly unlikely that this species has survived into the modern day. If they have, it's very likely in small numbers. Valtiel's natural doctrine and theories on the creation of life are worth mentioning here as we try to understand the nature of non-human races of Fear and Hunger, as I believe them to be almost entirely correct. In its first volume, he writes, "The older gods have shown a talent for creation of life since the beginning of time. The animated clay figurines that inhabit Mahabre are a perfect example of this. They're just golems created for physical work. Without rest, they carry on their duties. The older gods would create life for different purposes whenever necessary. All this, I believe, eventually led to the ultimate life form, the human being. This is a theory that contradicts the Skin Bible's assertion that humanity was created at the dawn of time, and instead argues that humanity was the culmination of a long series of experiments into creating life, which is a theory I believe more. For the remainder of this video, we're going to be looking at every species through the lens of natural doctrine to show exactly why I'm inclined to believe it. Whilst Fear and Hunger is a setting with a creationist origin, there is a degree of evolution present. This is not evolution as you or I understand it, but rather a system of divine beings iterating upon a base form over time, like a writer working on subsequent drafts. Sometimes these older gods have been known to meddle with each other's designs, causing wholly new forms to emerge, but more on this later. In this sense, the Lord of the Flies can be seen as an attempt at the first in a similar chain of evolution, akin to our real-world Australopithecus or even Homo habilis. Valtiel's creation of husks is also an attempt at doppelgangers hundreds of years prior to the events of Termina, being clones created by a mysterious black liquid in the blood of humans. Had Valtiel been able to continue working, perhaps he could have created a species as complex as humanity, but this isn't the case. Also found within the City of the Gods are the Scarabs. Though it's implied through dialogue with the new gods that these were once men, they've since developed to have a distinct society within the city of Mahabre and consider themselves apart from humans, referring to themselves as insect-like, a category of creatures with their own civilization I've already made a video on. Scarabs bear the marks of sulphur cultists upon their face, potentially being a sect of worshippers who deteriorated into the forms they are now, either due to the influence of sulphur or the god of the depths, or a bizarre combination of both. In spite of this seemingly evident human origin, Scarabs themselves claim they have resided in the city since the very beginning, hinting at them being entirely non-human. However, this claim is contradicted by another claim of theirs, that they took the city from a race who they call Spiderlings, the original inhabitants of Mahabre. There is no direct evidence of the existence of a society of spiders, but the large number of humanoid animals found throughout the setting, as well as the many references to spiders across the game, lend some credence to the idea that Mahabre was once inhabited by a race of spider-like humanoids. The usage of spider iconography amongst cultures in the dungeons of all ages, the mentions of spiderlings by Scarabs, and the heavy presence of spiders within Mahabre, particularly around the Temple of Torment, all suggest that there is perhaps some truth in a society of spiderlings, but as no real record of them remains, it's impossible to say for sure. Whilst Mahabre is by far the biggest hub for distinctly non-human civilizations, most of them do not make any attempt to build, to develop things, to do anything more than live in the ruins of their predecessors. If each creature in the setting was made to fulfill a purpose, then these are the creatures with the most basic. So let us now move beyond this ancient city and assess some of the more progressive non-human specimens. Of the cave dwellers, the new gods state,
Primal and savage beings. The poor souls were once stuck in the black because of a cave-in.
Despite this assumed human point of origin, enough time has passed for the cave dwellers to have a notably non-human biology and distinct identity. Whilst this isn't abnormal for creatures afflicted by the transformative nature of the dungeons, the cave dwellers are notably different to other abhumans corrupted by the darkness. They appear to have undergone a kind of divinely ordained anacladagenesis, which is a phenomena wherein members of a species in total isolation can develop along a new evolutionary path, whilst the original species remains. This lends credence to Valtiel's writings on species not being perfect at the dawn of time, but rather an iterative series of beings with lots of variation to serve specific purpose. Cave dwellers are communal, not explicitly hostile, and are known to trade with humans. Some even display an interest in learning more of the surface world. Whilst yes, they do display human heads on spikes in displays of intimidation, they are one of the few enemy types in game to not immediately be hostile. Unlike other creatures of the dungeon, which are content to simply live a solitary life in the darkness, cave dweller civilization seems to have developed to at least a lower Paleolithic level of development. They utilize crude stone tools and spears to hunt and defend themselves. They're also known to use poison on their spears to more effectively hunt their targets. In fact, when looking at the culture of the cave dwellers, they seem to be even more advanced than this. They grow mushrooms and crops in a sort of agriculture, and assuming the cave dweller merchant trades items crafted in the colony, they seem to have a basic grasp of alchemelia, something also implied by their usage of poisons. Assuming they have this understanding of herbs and poisons, there's likely a degree of medical development in the colony. There's a cave dweller to the left of the village who appears to have some understanding of stonemasonry and is actively expanding the village, and the full minecart next to him implies that mining is something that the cave dwellers do engage in. The traders' usage of silver as currency and the various jobs of cave dwellers throughout the village, including dedicated guards, hints to a basic understanding of economics and progression beyond a basic subsistence economy into a model of creating surplus for the sake of selling it, though whether the system is used internally or only used to barter with outsiders is unclear. That said, stealing from cave dwellers can net a player silver, so their economy does seem to be internal. Cave dweller children can be found in the village, and the village does seem to be growing and actively expanding its borders, provided it isn't completely wiped out by moonless guards. Furthermore, a book found in one of these houses implies that there is a written language that the cave dwellers use. They also have a spoken language probably, but given that we see a member of the village killed for attempting to communicate with us, it seems as though contact with outsiders is strictly forbidden outside of trade. This might not be the case for all outsiders though. The wolf mask cultists are found directly below the village and seem to be given corpses by the cave dwellers through a pulley system, though what they get in return is unknown. Another Grogoth sect, the Yellow Mages, are allowed to practice their dark arts near the cave dweller village, and the usage of yellow robes in the decoration of cave dweller effigies, and even in the clothes of the cave dweller merchant, implies a degree of friendliness between the groups. My theory is that repeated trade, as well as shared love of bloodshed, has caused the cave dwellers to begin to introduce some of the religious customs of the Yellow Mages into their own ceremonies, even though Yellow Mages venerate Grogoth, and cave dwellers appear to worship the God of the Depths. Indeed, it may be their proximity to the corpse of the God of the Depths, as well as their routine sacrifices to it, that allow them to maintain some degree of sanity in the darkness. This collaboration with Yellow Mages, Wolf Masks, and Knights of Rondon has meant that the cave dwellers have access to luxuries like ornate rugs and pieces of artwork which they display around their village. Whilst the village can be utterly decimated by moonless guards, two villagers will always be alive unless the player takes the action to kill them. With over 350 years passing between the events of Fear and Hunger and Termina, it's my belief that increased trade and willingness to work with outsiders could lead to cave dweller society persisting into the modern day. That said, through Osar's opening dialogue we see no sign of cave dweller presence within the dungeons, so their survival is unlikely. Whatever the case, the existence of cave dwellers does prove the theory in natural doctrines to a degree. We see a species being iterated upon and developed to better serve a purpose, though in this case, it's kind of unclear what that purpose is. Now, let's jump forward to the events of Termina and look at a non-human species that definitely does continue their existence into the present. Beneath the city of Behelit, hidden away from human eyes, you can find the Ratkin. Though hostile to outsiders by default, a player with the mastery over vermin skill can open dialogue with them. Unlike insects, who for the most part immediately accept a character with mastery over insects as their superior, Ratkin are not so easily convinced, stating that no human has ever or will ever be their master, and going as far as to outright ignore you when attacking in a gang. The origins of the Ratkin are unclear, the new gods have no dialogue on them, and they have not been written about by any of the setting's scholars, so consider this the first real study of them by YouTube's worst dark priest. The Ratkin inhabit the foundations of decay, the area deep beneath Behelit, not the My Chemical Romance song. Much like our real-world rats, they seem to engage in commensalism with the humans of Behelit, relying in part on scavenging and collecting lost items both for subsistence and also as a kind of curiosity. That said, these rats have developed a degree of civilization separate from their surface-dwelling counterparts. The mischief within the foundations of decay show a basic understanding of tool usage. They manufacture crude garments with rope, and have set aside areas dedicated to the growth of the edible penny bun mushroom, as well as the invigorating blue herb. Some even pierce their ears in what I assume is a show of wealth or status. It's evident that a notable part of their culture is religion, but to understand their practices requires some speculation, and there are quite a few interpretations. To start this discussion, I'm going to make the bold assertion that, like the cave dwellers, Ratkin are an offshoot of humanity, created through Valtil's theories of divine anaclatogenesis. They were created from humans to serve a specific purpose. I also believe they were created following the events of the first game, being created by the god of fear and hunger. My primary evidence for this is that the new gods do not comment on Ratkin, but do comment on other creatures found within Termina such as the Ikiturso, which are not present in the first game but did exist at that point in the timeline. They also comment on the Termina festival, for instance, something that we haven't seen yet, but it did exist at that point. Their language can only be understood by those with affinity with the god of fear and hunger, further showcasing this connection. The Ratkin religion is shown through two major sources. The Small Things amulet depicts a rat god and raises agility. Agility being raised is tied to affinity with fear and hunger, so that's a pretty clear connection. Somewhat more confusing is the statue kept in the Foundations of Decay, which depicts a strange humanoid demon thing. Whilst it has a lot in common with a few depictions of Grogoroth, notably the bodies beneath it seem to be preserved, not destroyed, cannibalized, or any of the other Big G classics. So I interpret this as a shrine to suffering, an aspect of fear and hunger. The self-imposed squalor of the Ratkin may also be a part of this worship of a god of struggle and hardship. So if we assume the assertions of Valtil to be true, then Ratkin are a creation of fear and hunger, in the same way that depths likely had a hand in the creation of cave dwellers. These creatures have a human point of origin, but have been moulded to better suit a purpose, which in both cases I assume to be the protection of sacred areas and continued worship of their creator deities. There's probably a lot more to it, but part of the old gods vibe is that they're unknowable, they do things for reasons beyond our understanding. However, it is interesting that depths and fear and hunger seem to have a lot more of an interest in creating entire species and providing them with the tools to survive long term than gods like Rare, who use their transformative powers primarily as a kind of punishment or judgment. Perhaps through increased studies into these creatures we can have a better understanding of both the old and ascended gods and their machinations on humanity. Beyond the Ratkin and cave dwellers, there are a number of creatures that we know very little about, but they do serve as further proof of the theories of natural doctrines, and that humans are not unique, but rather just one of the latest in an iterative design pushed forward by competing gods. Termina is full of other interesting creatures that further prove Valtil's natural doctrine and showcase the role of creatures in this setting as having a divine purpose. For instance, the Icky Turso. Of this strange being, the new god state,
These peculiar beasts run wild in the deepest forests of Europa. They have a clear alignment with the older god Vinushka, but what exactly this connection is, we do not know. The Icky Turso are known to rise from their slumber during times when nature is under threat.
This assessment is aligned with the Icky Turso that we can meet in-game, which remains asleep, and when Raoul says that it is waiting for the return of Vinushka to wake up. One particularly damaging time for global ecology was Ragnarvolda going insane and trying to kill every single monster in the world in his ending S, and indeed we see in the splash screen that an Icky Turso has risen from its slumber and been killed. These creatures have a directly stated purpose and serve it, making them aligned with the findings of natural doctrines. Icky Turso are very much just an extension of their creator god, with Vinushka being described as follows in his skin Bible.
The cycle of destruction and creation is seen in the purest forms in nature. Thus, it comes as no surprise that the very god of nature, Vinushka, is an offspring of the two older gods, Golgoroth and Civilian. Like the nature of mankind, the nature of Vinushka too can change from fiery raging volcanoes to serene grasslands where a gentle wind lulls one to sleep.
Another creature that seems to have a set purpose is the Crimson Father, the Gary the Snail enemy, though exactly what this purpose is I'm not sure. They have an explicitly stated interest in influencing the human world, and Creator Miro comments that the creature appears suddenly after bloodbaths like snails after rain. This, as well as their association with the god of sulfur, hints that perhaps they are heralds of the arrival of their god, or are actively seeking out particularly violent humans to recruit into their cult. Regardless of motive, they're clearly non-human creatures created to serve a higher being, again aligning with natural doctrines. A more complicated creature is the Sergal, which is originally from a webcomic that I can't pronounce. It's called Vilus, I don't know, you tell me. In the world of Fear and Hunger, they are inhabitants of a distant continent called Vinland, the world's equivalent of our America, using the name given to the continent by Norse explorers in our own history. The Sergal are said to be tribal, but are also known to be intelligent. Though the race was present during the time of the first game, as is shown through the Sergal spear weapon, we have only met one Sergal, being Rancid. Whilst Rancid seems to take issue with distortions from a perceived sense of normalcy and looks down on humanity for their fickle nature and weakness, we don't know if this is due to just them being a bit odd, or if this is a value of the entire Sergal society. Much like the Lizardmen and the human race, the Sergal race raises a question when assessing species through Valtil's lens. What is the purpose of these creatures? These are multifaceted creatures with diversity of thought, numerous civilizations and individual motives. They appear elevated above some of the other highly homogeneous species that can be encountered. If each creature serves a purpose, then what is ours? Well, I think this is where the works of Enki and the Skin Bibles can help us come to a conclusion. Sylvian created mankind simply to love them, and we know from other sources that Grogoroth used to enjoy walking amongst them. These are beings influenced by both creation and destruction, creatures born from conflicting forces, a contradiction that pushes them beyond being simple worker drones. Rare is said to have a hatred for humanity and meddles within their lives, and the two known ascended gods, as well as Sulfur, all routinely interfere within the affairs of humans. Vitruvia, the alleged creator of mankind, herself found flaws within the design according to Enki. A wager contradictions in purpose was one such flaw, hence her attempt to homogenize humanity through worship and copying of the perfect idyllic being, Ulmer. Humanity has too many influences upon them to ever serve a singular purpose. In short, humanity can be seen as a good baseline species upon which the higher powers can exercise their transformative powers to suit their unknown ends. Humans are brilliant body horror fodder, but impossible to define in the abstract. It's for this reason that I believe there is a unique difference between humanity and the other species of Fear and Hunger, being the sheer amount of interest placed upon them by greater forces. Even following the departure of the world by old gods, external forces continue to have an interest in the development of the human race. And their diverging visions for what this development is what creates the many and various forms of transformed human societies. Whilst many gods, old and new, have dabbled in creating species entirely from scratch, a large number find themselves drawn, as Sylvian was said to have been, to Vitruvia's design. Creatures like the cave dwellers and the Ratkin are simply variants of humanity that better suit the whims of their patron god. There may well be similar human variants created by other deities that remain undiscovered. The same may be true of the Circles, as Vinland is said to be steeped in old god influence, and it also may have been true of the Lizardmen at one point, but until we are presented with more evidence, I would wager that humanity is, whilst not a perfect species, the most appealing canvas upon which to build. Vitruvia's design endures because it is so uniquely appealing to gods both old and new, so as the old gods wane in influence and newer forces rise, what will this mean for the future of humanity, and what strange new variants may we see develop? Fear and Hunger is not strictly creationist, there is a degree of evolution. But this evolution is all built around the idea that humans are the perfect form to exploit. As the setting continues, I really think we are going to see some more strange, wacky offshoots of the human race. Thanks for watching. Thank you to the channel members for their continued support, and also thank you to Yuri for the voice work. Much appreciated. Okay, see you all next time. Bye.